Hey everybody, this is Tressy Trek. Welcome. Hey, I hope Facebookers made it over. I just did a quickie announcement just to let them know we're not trying to ignore you guys. Facebook has been giving us trouble. And Jay says that Rumble is having some trouble too. So, plus my internet. So, we'll do the best we can. But I'm so excited about our guest tonight. But before we get started, can you click and like? Look up, click, and like. That'll help us if you do that. Okay. All right. I do want to give an announcement that I gave in the chat. I think it was this morning. I just want to let you know no one's being blocked from the chat. No one. We have it shut down. All right. That's for me to survive. Telegram, the twilight zone of Telegram. I have to have the chat shut down except for Trek nights. Then we party. So to me, it's just a big celebration on Trek night. Plus, we've got the live, the Q&A, and then the party. So it's just a celebration twice a week, right? So you're not being blocked in any way. Everybody's welcome, okay? All right. Okay, so now I want to introduce our guest, which I am so excited about because he talks the way I do. Only his way of doing what I do with emotional roots to physical issues are different. And so I think it's going to be like a very effective talk to hear how to think about what we've already been doing in another way, come at it another angle. And so I can't wait to hear him. So his name is Denis Carroll. He is a best-selling author and cancer survivor. He has spent the last 20 years researching and testing alternative healing therapies in search of the holy grail of health and wellness. He has worked for the last 10 years to help terminally ill cancer patients. And I thought I saw 50,000 or 500,000 people, something like that you've worked with. He's worked with terminally ill cancer patients who doctors had given up on and sent home to die to fully recover their health. Following a cathartic healing experience in 2012, he has focused on mind-body healing protocols for the last 10 years. He discovered a new body of medical knowledge called Germanic healing knowledge, or GHK, and developed it was developed by a German medical doctor named Gerd Hammer. After nearly 4 decades of cancer research, working directly with over 50,000 patients, there we go, Dr. Hammer concluded that cancer is a survival biological program designed to ensure your survival, not kill you. Dr. Hammer had a court-audited 92% success rate in healing primarily terminally ill cancer patients. All right. So terminal cancer is a misdiagnosis is Danny's first book. The book won the 2023 Global Book Awards in the category of medical books and got many bestseller awards on Amazon. All right. He is developing a community author platform to write a 500 plus series of books examining how conventional medicine and Germanic healing knowledge approach the cause, symptoms, and solutions to specific diseases. All right. He is a pioneer of new medical discoveries and healing protocols that most are unwilling to explore until they have no other alternative. So I am very excited to welcome Danny today because he has had the kind of success that I have had in my practice. So, I've told people in the past in one session by pulling the lie, and he calls it a little bit different. Multiple sclerosis has disappeared immediately. Blindness or partial blindness, deafness, sense of smell has come back. Cancer, she passed a grapefruit-sized tumor the next day. and many other things all in one session. And that proves what Danny's about to say about finding the problem, dealing with it, and then having immediate results, really. Right, Danny?
Absolutely correct, Tressy. Yes. When you find that magic switch, it triggers a cathartic healing process that is almost impossible to explain, but quite extraordinary when you experience it. So yeah, I mean, it's mind-blowing.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, take it away. You have the floor.
Okay, so where do we start? I guess we should start at the beginning, right? How did I get on to this crazy journey? We go back to 2004. I live in Bombay, in India. I've been in India since the mid 1990s. I came to India on a 6-month posting, and I'm still here, basically. So in 2004, I had a close friend who was diagnosed with cancer. I don't remember exactly which cancer she was diagnosed with, but in India, if you don't have health insurance and you can't afford medical treatment, people will step over you in the road if you're dying, basically. There's very little value for life here. We have moving towards 1.5 billion people here, so people don't really care if you're sick or dying. So my friend, she couldn't afford the cancer treatment, so I ran a marathon. I raised a lot of money for her cancer treatment, and before she went into hospital, while she had a cancer diagnosis, she looked fit and fine. I mean, she had no external symptoms of disease. She had no pain. She didn't have any visible symptoms, basically. So when I raised this money for her treatment, she was delighted. And when she went into hospital, she started chemotherapy treatments. And she used to message me from hospital saying, "Danny, I'm not sure what these doctors are doing, but it feels like they're putting poison in my veins." And of course they were, right? And unfortunately, I didn't realize this at the time. She had 3 rounds of chemo and then she died. I mean, I was absolutely devastated at the time. I couldn't believe that she died so quickly. So I swore to myself at the time that I would find a better solution to the problem we call cancer. Now, I'm not a doctor. In fact, when I promised myself that I would find the cure for cancer, I would have been in my early 30s. I was working in asset management and strategic management consulting and venture capital. So I have no history in either alternative healing, in conventional healing. It's just not my business, basically. So I started on the journey. For the first 8 years until 2012, I studied every healing modality available. I spent over a decade studying nutritional healing. I practiced with bark flower remedies for about 8 years, and I still use bark. I studied energy healing, spiritual healing. I studied Ayurveda and homeopathy, and anything that essentially gave a promise to be able to solve the problem called cancer. The problem I had, Tressy, is that in these early years, I could have 2 people with the same diagnosis and put them on the same protocols, same vegan diet, the same flower remedies, and whatever modalities we were using at that point in time. And there was always a situation where one would live and one would die. And it's like, why? I mean, nobody could ever give an explanation as to what was happening. And it wasn't until 2012 where I had a cathartic healing experience that the pennies dropped, exactly how we function biologically. In 2012, I had a very strange health experience where my entire body was riddled with golf ball sized knots. My calf muscles, my thighs, my arms, my back. So for 6 months, I was in physio, having these knots ironed out of my muscles. And basically, what the physio does is, I mean, they get their elbows like this, right, and they put their body weight on your muscles and they iron out these knots, right. And I mean, I have a good pain threshold, but this was excruciating, right? So I'd go in, have the knots ironed out, go back, and muscles bruised and everything, and go back 2 days later, and knots had all come back again, right? So I was on this excruciating merry-go-round for a 6-month period, and it didn't matter any of the modalities. Bark didn't solve the problem. Nutritional healing didn't solve the problem. I turned vegan for 5 years to test the nutritional healing thesis. You can go online. You'll find a TED presentation that I made on nutritional healing in 2010, which were my early days of exploration. But none of the modalities that I was practicing could seemingly solve this problem. And at the time, I was running ultra marathons. I got in 2010, I got in the Guinness Book of Records running ultra marathons, which is another story. So at this point in time, I could barely walk, let alone run. Now I had an interesting challenge in my life at that point in time. I split up from my ex-wife in 2011. I'd found a new life partner who happened to be an American diplomat. She'd been posted to Bombay for a 2-year period, and her next posting was in Santiago de Chile. So, I mean, that's a 10,000 mile or a 40-hour journey. So we basically decided that after she left India, that we would terminate our relationship. But we'd gone through a 2-year relationship with no expectation of commitment or longevity, which is a breeding ground for finding soulmates, right? So we had become soulmates, and when it came to terminating the relationship, we just couldn't terminate it. So we met on the Friday night before she was leaving, and we sat down and we had a heart-to-heart, and we decided that rather than terminating the relationship as we had agreed, that we would try the most outrageous, ridiculous long-distance relationship between India and South America, which is crazy, and we would see if the relationship fizzled out. And what happened, Tressy, is on Friday night and the previous 6 months, my entire body was riddled with golf ball-sized knots. And then when I woke up on Saturday morning, it magically disappeared. And I'm like, oh my God, right? I did at the time, Tressy, I didn't honestly know why they had come. And I didn't really know why they had disappeared. All I knew was that the only difference between Friday night and Saturday morning was that basically my then girlfriend and now wife, we had agreed that we would not prematurely terminate our relationship. And all of a sudden, all of these knots in my body just poof, just disappeared. And wow. That's when the penny dropped, right? So what, on reflection, Tressy, in my period between 2004 and 2012, sorry, basically I'd been studying this with the bark flower remedies, and I'd been studying this with nutritional healing, but basically what I was doing was studying them as separate systems, where it doesn't work that way, right? I mean, this is an integrated and holistic system, and until you can connect all of the dots between what's going on in your life and how it impacts your emotions and your psyche, and what impact that has and how that changes your biology, you can never connect those dots and understand how this works as an integrated system. So when I experienced that cathartic healing experience in 2012, I had planned to do a PhD, and basically I was looking for a university that had a medical specialization and a psychology specialization, and I was planning to build a bridge between the two modalities. Finding a university that has both of those is apparently not very easy, because I couldn't find one. And in the process of looking for that university, I found this medical doctor, this German medical doctor. He was reported to have a court-audited 92% success rate in healing terminal cancer patients. So the lights went on, the eureka moment hit, and I found this German medical doctor called Dr. Richard Geerd Hummer. And then instead of doing a PhD, I essentially spent the last 12 years both studying and testing his medical discoveries. Now, I'll give you some brief background to this German doctor. He was and still is the youngest medical doctor to ever qualify to practice medicine in Germany. He's a medical doctor. He also has a doctorate in theology. So he's a very balanced spiritual and biological man. In 1978, when he was in his late 40s, his 19-year-old son was shot and murdered. And 2 months after Dr. Hummer, after his son Dirk died, Dr. Hummer got a very rare form of testicular cancer called a testicular teratoma with metastasis to the stomach. Now, he was given a 1% chance to survive, but he had surgery. He had his testicle removed and part of his stomach, but he did not take chemotherapy or radiation. As I understand, more than 90% of medical doctors do not, for good reason. So he survived that. And at the time, Tressy, Dr. Hummer was the head of, Dr. Hummer was a specialist that they call an internist or a medical researcher. And at the time, he was the head of a cancer research unit at a university in Germany called Tübingen University, and he was the head of the gynecological oncology unit, and he was working with 200 female terminal cancer patients as part of his medical research. And what he basically did is he went round to these 200 women and questioned them whether they'd gone through a similar type of emotional trauma before they got cancer. In his case, he could not believe that there was no correlation or causation between his son getting murdered and then him getting cancer on a reproductive organ. Right? This was his aha moment. Because he was a traditional medical doctor, he didn't know if there was any causal link, but he had a very strong suspicion, right? I mean, otherwise he's in his late 40s, he's a healthy guy, right? And then all of a sudden his son gets murdered. He then gets cancer on a reproductive organ. So he interviewed these 200 ladies and discovered out of 200 of them, 200 of them had gone through some form of emotional trauma before they got cancer. And when he started putting the women into different categories, of say ovarian cancer and uterine cancer and breast cancer, mammary and introductory, etc., what he observed was that the women in the same category had suffered from the same type of emotional trauma. So, for example, the women with ovarian cancer had all gone through some form of profound loss, where they'd lost either a child or a pet or an animal that was very traumatic for them before they got ovarian cancer. And fast forward, more, though those 50,000 cancer patients are not mine, thankfully.
Sorry.
Although I'm probably in the thousands, but yeah, not 50,000. Those were Dr. Hummer's patients that he worked with. What he basically concluded is that cancer is a survival biological program that is designed to either increase or decrease our capacity in times of trouble, in order to help us to solve a life crisis. Okay, so in his situation, his son was shot and murdered, his 19-year-old son, which basically, from a survival perspective, means that, I mean, he's lost progeny, right? So, so what nature did in that particular situation was to increase the size of his testicle. And that what he discovered is that the tumor that he got on his testicle basically had a biological purpose and a biological function. So that tissue, that tumor that we call it, that he got on his testicle basically was functional tissue that produced testosterone and sperm. And basically, so what nature has done is increased his capacity to basically to get his wife pregnant, so that he had a greater capacity in order to be able to achieve that. And what he later discovered is that if he had indeed got his wife pregnant, then the biological purpose of that biological program would have been fulfilled, and then nature would have switched that biological program off in the same way that it switched it on in order to increase his capacity, and the extra capacity would have been removed. Now, the easiest way to understand this concept of tissue being added and tissue being removed basically is if you look at a woman's menstrual cycle. Okay, now in the woman's menstrual cycle, in the first half of the cycle, tissue would be added to the walls of the uterus. The biological purpose of that is to facilitate a pregnancy. If the woman does not get pregnant, then the tissue is removed. So the whole process of nature is basically tissue plus, tissue minus, tissue plus, tissue minus, or depending on which part of the biology is affected, tissue minus, tissue plus. And basically what Dr. Hummer discovered is that every change in our biology, whether it's a runny nose, whether it's a sore throat, or whether it's a cancer, whether it's an arthritis, an osteoporosis, an IBS, whatever, all of these changes in our biology are part of a survival biological program. But the problem is that we don't understand it. So what happens is when we go into conflict, so in Dr. Hummer's case, it was when his son was shot and murdered. He's gone into conflict, basically, of losing his son. Nature, in his these programs run in our subconscious mind. Okay, so you don't sit there and say, "Oh, okay, I've just lost my son, so therefore, let me switch on the program to increase the size of my testicles so that I get my wife pregnant and replace my child." Okay, we don't think that, right? So these programs run in our subconscious mind, and basically when we hit a life crisis or a challenge in life to overcome, basically our subconscious mind switches in these biological programs. Our capacity either increases or decreases depending on what changes in our biology we need in order to solve the problem. And once we have resolved the conflict, the process is then reversed and the extra capacity basically is removed. Okay, now this is what we call cancer. Okay, so say in Dr. Hummer's case, he had extra capacity added to his testicle. If he'd have known that at the time, and he did not, because he was a traditional medical doctor, he would have understood not to remove his testicle because there was no need to do so. He only learned that later during his research process. So he had the surgery, and he said in hindsight he would not have done that. Now, Dr. Hummer basically he estimated that when his medical discoveries are allowed to surface, that 95% of all of today's medical treatments and protocols that are based on symptoms will become obsolete. He was put in prison. He spent over 3 years in prison. He had 12 attempts on his life, and they tried to put him in a mental institution 75 times over a 30-year period. And all of this was designed to make sure that he never had the time, space, opportunity, or money in order to get his medical discoveries out to the public. And the system did everything they could to malign him and bury his medical discoveries. What he discovered a little later is that basically the medical system buried his medical discoveries, tested those discoveries behind closed doors, understood that he had essentially discovered the philosopher's stone of medicine, and unraveled the biological code. So the elites decided that they would take those medical discoveries and use them in their own community, and suppress those medical discoveries from being used amongst the masses. This is the little book that Dr. Hummer wrote. This is the scientific chart of Germanic New Medicine. It's quite a monster. This has basically, and this is the unraveling of the biological code. It's an extraordinary body of work. It does take some getting your head around this subject. Now, my journey really took a major turn in 2015. So I studied Germanic. It was called Germanic New Medicine. Dr. Hummer changed that to what he called in German Germanische Heilkunde, or in English Germanic healing knowledge. In 2015, I was training under one of Dr. Hummer's teachers in Canada, a teacher called Isidore Laker, who's a great teacher in Germanic healing knowledge. I went to the UK, basically transiting to go to Toronto, and my then girlfriend flew from Chile to London to meet my family. Okay, so my family chucked a big party in the garden, and within a few hours of being on the ground, I had suffered from irritable bowel syndrome and ulcerative colitis at that point for about 15 years. And when I landed in London, I had the worst ulcerative colitis or irritable bowel syndrome I'd ever experienced. For 72 hours, I had crippling stomach cramps. I was on the toilet every hour for 72 hours, and I was in some of the worst shape I'd ever been in. I was supposed to be going from there to Toronto to do my practitioner's course, which I nearly never made because I couldn't get more than 10 seconds away from the bathroom. So my my then girlfriend said to me, let's try using this medical knowledge that you've been studying to see if we can solve this problem. And I said to her, okay, I'd been studying it for 3 years by then, but my knowledge was essentially still theoretical. I hadn't completed my practitioner's course, so I didn't really know how to use the knowledge that I'd been acquiring. So we were laying on the bed in my parents' house, and my girlfriend said to me, "Right, okay, Danny, what conflict is it that causes pain in the intestines?" And according to Dr. Hummer, this is basically what he called an indigestible anger conflict, which basically is an ugly problem in life that you cannot solve. And she asked me a second question: when does the pain start? And I said, well, the pain starts when you solve the problem. And she said to me then, okay, what problem have we solved by coming to England? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we came home My parents called all my family over. There was rarely beautiful sunshine in London. We had a big barbecue and a party in the garden, and everybody got drunk and had fun and stuff. And there was no family conflab that we could point to say that was the problem-solving session that triggered the problem. So what I learned through this process is that problem-solving in life can be quite subtle. So I was laying on the bed, Tressy, and I was folded over in half in pain, and basically we were laying there on the bed, and after an hour of thinking and questioning and talking, I said to my then girlfriend that I think I know what problem we've solved. And I was laying there. Some background: my ex-wife and my family used to fight like cat and dog and didn't get on. And when I introduced my new life partner to my family, basically they loved her, right? So we were laying on the bed, and I said, I think the problem that we have solved is that my partner fights with my family. And Tressy, I kid you not, I was laying on the bed, and before I said those magic words, I was literally folded in half, going, it's my stomach cramps, right? Awful, worst I've ever had, right? And I'm laying there, and I said, I think we've solved the problem that my partner fights with my family. And I'm laying there, and all of a sudden, my stomach went, dig, poof, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm laying there, and I said to my girlfriend, the pain just went. And she said to me, what are you talking about? I said, I don't know. The pain just went. My stomach just went ding, and now I feel fine. She said, you mad? You were just like folded over in half in stomach cramps just like 1 second ago. I'm like, I know. I don't know, but this is amazing, right? So this was the first time that I had consciously triggered cathartic healing. And it just blew me away, right? And I'm like, oh my God, now I need to get to this training, and now I need to learn how to use these medical discoveries. This is just amazing. So I went to my practitioner's training, and one of Dr. Hummer's many extraordinary discoveries is that from a brain CT scan without contrast, you can see your entire life history. Okay, so one of the opportunities during the practitioner's course was to start learning to read brain CT scans, and the way you did that was to get your own brain CT scan done, take it and send it to the teacher in advance, and she would go through your brain CT scan and basically tell your entire life history just from the brain CT scan without knowing you, right? So I thought, right, I'm doing this, right? I've got to learn to read brain CT scans. So I got my brain CT scan and I gave it to my teacher. And these consultations basically were in front of the class so that everybody could learn to read the brain CT scan and also learn to carry out a health consultation in a group setting, right? So anyway, my teacher, she said, oh, Danny, I've gone through your brain CT scan. She said, I see that you've had lung cancer in your left lung. And I'm like, how did you know that? So basically what happened is in 2000, my left lung fully collapsed, and I should have died. It took them 6 hours to get me into ICU. I was in the boonies in South India, and a long way from nowhere when my lung collapsed. I should have died, and I didn't. At the time, the doctors basically said I had what they described as a spontaneous pneumothorax, which in English, when I asked the doctor, okay, what does that mean? He basically said, oh, Danny, your lung had a bad day. It spontaneously exploded and then collapsed. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very compelling, right? So anyway, it was what it was. My teacher said, oh, yeah, you've had lung cancer in your left lung. I'm like, yeah, I had a collapsed lung in 2000. And she said, oh, and by the way, you currently have a testicular cancer program running, and your left testicle is smaller than your right testicle, right? Now, honestly, this was probably a little more than I'd bargained for, right? I'm sitting in a group of 25 perfect strangers, and sitting there discussing the relative size of my testicles in front of 25 strangers. And I went, yeah, okay. And I said, well, you're absolutely right. I do have a smaller left testicle than I do my right testicle. And we basically pieced it together. What happened is when I was studying at the London School of Economics in the early 1990s, my then fiance in the UK, basically she got pregnant, and she did not want to burden me with the pregnancy, and was concerned because I was already up to my ears in stress studying at LSE. So she took a unilateral decision to abort the pregnancy without telling me. And she only told me a few years later, when the relationship came to a natural conclusion. She basically told me that she'd got pregnant and aborted my child. And the shock of that news basically triggered lung cancer, which, according to Dr. Hummer, is caused by a fear of death for either yourself or for a loved one. So the fear of the death of the aborted child basically triggered lung cancer. And in my testicle, that's triggered by what Dr. Hummer described as a loss conflict. Basically, it was the loss of that child triggered the testicular cancer. That program went into resolution in 2017 when I had a vasectomy after I remarried in 2016 and decided to take on the role of contraception in our relationship. And then my testicle regrew, and I had crushing testicular pain in my testicle for 6 months. Now, Tressy, I appreciate, I assume that you do not have testicles, and therefore you probably do not understand what crushing testicular pain means, but it's crushing.
Right.
Trust me, any form of testicular pain is not good. Luckily, I knew that the biological purpose of that pain was to increase the size of my testicle, and in fact to make it larger than when it was before it began, and that it would increase my testosterone and my libido. So that sort of got me through the pain without understanding, number one, that the pain would end, and number two, that it had a purpose, a biological purpose, and that biological purpose was to increase my testosterone levels and my libido, which I wasn't unhappy about. So that's basically how that testicular cancer resolved in 2017. I knew the vasectomy could trigger the healing of that program. So when it happened, it wasn't a surprise. So that was in 2017. So I've done lung cancer, I've done testicular cancer. In 2019, I got jaw cancer, and it was from a 5-second fight over American politics with my wife. Yes, that's another story, right? We won't go too much into that one. But it triggered cancer in my jaw here. Now, this particular type of cancer, the pain doesn't start until 3-4 days after the conflict shock. So the conflict was 5 seconds long, and the pain didn't start until 3-4 days afterwards. The problem in this part of the jaw is you have all of what Dr. Hummer called germ layers. So the pain can be from when a conflict just begins or from when the conflict ends. So you have to go through a process of limitation to basically find out what causes problem. And it took me a long time to find it. So I ended up with a tumor on this jaw. It was very painful. When I found the conflict, basically, in the same way that you can switch off IBS, you can also switch off cancer, by the way. So when I understood the conflict that caused this problem, when you consciously connect the cause of a problem to the symptoms of a problem, basically you can switch it off like a light switch, right? So I switched the cancer off on my jaw. So back to the tissue plus, tissue minus, tissue plus, tissue minus. Basically, in this area, tissue had been added to my jaw here. And then after I resolved the conflict, the tissue needed to be removed. Now, this removal of this particular tissue is done with something that we call tuberculosis mycobacteria. Okay, tuberculosis mycobacteria, according to Dr. Hummer, is basically one of nature's mechanisms in order to be able to remove the tissue that was added during a conflict, right? And the way it does that essentially is by rotting the flesh. Okay, so you'll hear of women when they have breast cancer, if the breast opens with the tuberculosis bacteria, they will tell you that they can smell rotting flesh, right? It's very unpleasant. Now, I had both the smell and the taste of rotting flesh in my mouth and my sinuses for a 4-month period while that tissue was removed. But what happened as a result, between the tumor coming on my jaw and the tissue being removed, basically what happened is all of my teeth fell out on one side of my mouth, right? So all of these, they're all false, right? All of my teeth fell out, and basically half of my jaw was destroyed through the process. So I can switch off the cancer. I can let the program run its course and remove the capacity that was added. But unfortunately, I'm unable to replace my own teeth. Otherwise, I do all of my own healing work. So I had to have a 5-hour reconstructive surgery on my jaw with a bone graft and implants put into my jaw, so that basically I could put teeth back in again. Now, from that 5-hour surgery, I took one painkiller. At the time of the surgery, I had like 35 stitches in my jaw. I had one painkiller at the time of the surgery, and I had one painkiller before I slept at nighttime. And then I woke up the next morning, and it's just like ba-dum, 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 like this, right? So I hate taking any form of medication. Okay, so I'd switched off pain from IBS and from herniated disc, lower back pain, upper back pain. I mean, all sorts of switched off itching from eczema and psoriasis and all sorts of things. Now, I'd never switched off pain from physical trauma. Right? This was a 5-hour surgery I just had on my jaw, right? So I said to myself, okay, Danny, let's see if we can switch this pain off so I don't have to take any medication, right? So I'm sitting there and I speak to myself, right? I mean, people must sit there looking at me saying, this guy is nuts, right? So anyway, I sit there speaking to myself, talking to my subconscious mind. And basically, I'm sitting there saying, okay, Danny, what is the biological purpose of pain? Okay, so according to Dr. Hummer, the biological purpose of pain is to stop you using an organ so that it has the time, space, and energy to heal. Okay, so if I cut my finger whilst I'm chopping vegetables in the kitchen, first thing it will do is swell up and become painful. Okay, now if you don't touch it, you will not have any pain. You can try this next time. Okay, as soon as you start using that finger and you want to do the dishes and you put your finger in the hot water, or you start mowing the lawn or whatever it is that you do with your finger on the weekends, as soon as you start using that finger, then it'll go ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. What nature's telling you, stop using it. If you stop using it, you won't have any pain. It has the time, space, and energy to heal. Nature is saying, wait until it is healed. Once it's healed, you can use it again. Okay, and I'm sitting there, and I got no teeth. Right, literally, all of my teeth are falling out, so I can't chew anything. Okay, so I'm sitting there thinking, right, okay, biological purpose of pain is to stop you from using something. I got no teeth, right? I mean, how can I chew when I got no teeth, right? So I said, okay, subconscious mind, I know the biological purpose of pain is to stop me from using something so that it has a time, space, and energy to heal. I have no teeth, right? I'm not going to use this side of my jaw. I can't chew anything. Switch off the pain. Bang! The pain just switched off, right?
Wow.
I'm going, oh, wow. That is amazing, right? That is amazing, right? So no more pain, no more painkillers, right? So anyway, but here's where it all goes wrong, Tressy, right? So basically, I'm trying to chew food on this side, right? I got teeth on this side, I got no teeth on this side, right? So I'm trying to chew food on this side, but inadvertently, sometimes food travels, right? And it accidentally goes whoop round to this side. And then all of a sudden, as soon as the food goes round this side, did you get ba-dum, 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 like this again, right? And I'm thinking, oh, damn. I've broken the deal, right? I told my subconscious mind I wouldn't use this side of my mouth so that it had the time, place, and energy to heal. And I just broke the deal. And I'm like, okay, subconscious mind, I'm really sorry. That was an error. Okay, let's go back to the old deal that I won't use this side of my mouth. I will give it the time, space, and energy to heal. Switch off the pain. Bang. Pain gone. Right? Now, I slept for 22 hours a day for 3 weeks after that surgery. Right? Literally get up, have a bite to eat, go to the bathroom, go back to sleep again. Okay? I slept for 22 hours a day with zero pain. I had zero painkillers. I took none of my dentist almost refused to do the surgery because I wouldn't take any of the antibiotics that he tried to prescribe me before the surgery. And when I went back and he said, Danny, did you take the painkillers that I suggested? And I said, no, doctor. Did you take the antibiotics I suggested? No, doctor. And when I went back after 3 weeks, basically my jaw had fully healed. And he was blown away that my jaw had fully healed. He took out the 35 stitches and it had completely healed and he couldn't believe it. So this is an example of what you can do when you learn these medical discoveries. Our conscious mind basically overrules our subconscious mind. So we can use a conscious mind to manipulate our subconscious mind. And even by switching off 20 on 10 pain from a 5-hour surgery, reconstructive surgery for my jaw. I'll give you one more cancer story just for fun, and then you can tell me to shut up.
No way. No way.
It's like, Daddy, shut up.
Yeah.
So COVID was a very difficult time for me. You know, right? I mean, the whole virus thing, whatever. Right? I don't want to get shut down on YouTube, right? They've already taken me off. But anyway, during COVID, I joined an organization called the American Frontline Doctors. I was invited to join that group that later morphed into a group called the World Doctors Alliance that I was a part of. And this was a group of doctors basically who were fighting the COVID mandates. Basically, long story short, doctors in the World Doctors Alliance were getting samples of those vials and putting them under electron microscopes. And we all know now, and unfortunately I knew then, that the contents of the vial was an absolute horror show. Okay, my wife is an American diplomat, right? So she is mandated to take the shot. This nearly ended our marriage, forced us in different directions in life, which in terms of my health post-COVID caused huge problems. I ended up with bone cancer in my left arm, in my left shoulder. I ended up with rheumatoid arthritis in my left arm that very strangely started at the injection point in my bicep and went down to the end of my thumb and used to dance up and down my arm. And I had a herniated disc in my neck with shooting pains down my left arm. So I had a left arm with multiple very intense pain programs running. And I had to learn to differentiate between what was the bone pain and the bone healing that was essentially caused by me trying to push my wife out of my life. So I had cancer on the outside of my bone in my arm, in my left shoulder, with the rheumatoid arthritis and the herniated disc, shooting pains down my left arm. I mean, it was an absolute nightmare. During that process, I learned how to switch off the rheumatoid arthritis. So basically, each time it started running up and down my arm like this, ding, 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 ding. Basically, I could look at it and say, okay, I know that rheumatoid arthritis is, according to Dr. Hummer, is caused by the fear of a brutal separation conflict, which basically means the fear of dying before you're ready to go, or the fear of losing somebody before you're ready to lose them. So basically, this was triggered by my wife taking the vaccine. This was a huge conflict in our relationship for obvious reasons. And when that went into healing, I ended up, the disc in the neck is called an intellectual conflict. It's the equivalent of being forced to bow against your will, like this.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Basically, what herniates the disc in the neck is an intellectual conflict. The bone cancer basically is caused by a self-worth conflict. And this was basically me. I threatened to divorce my wife during COVID. And I was trying to push her out of my life, which basically affects the outside of the limbs, because you are trying to push somebody out. If you have a problem where you're trying to pull somebody in, it will affect the inside of the arms instead of the outside. So I ended up with bone cancer in my shoulder, my arm, rheumatoid arthritis, herniated disc. It was all sorts of bad. The most complex health challenge I've ever had to resolve. Luckily, the rheumatoid arthritis I could switch off, but sometimes I had to switch it off like 100 times a day. It kept getting triggered back on again, because a number of the fights I had with my wife was actually in my apartment in Bombay. So my apartment had lots of tracks, triggers, or reminders of that emotional trauma, including my office table, my computer, my terrace, and all sorts of places would re-trigger that problem to start. So I had to constantly go around switching off those tracks, which basically means that saying to my subconscious mind, okay, I remember we had that fight about the vaccine on the terrace, and the terrace is now a track or reminder to that conflict. Switch off my terrace as a track or reminder to that conflict. I'm aware of it. What basically happens is that again, we use our conscious mind in order to overrule our subconscious mind, and basically we can switch these tracks off that cause chronic illness. When we learn how to do this, we can switch these tracks off like a light switch. Okay, now I've spent 12 years testing these medical discoveries, Tressy, right? I am the most skeptical person in the world when it comes to healing modalities, simply for the reason that for the best parts of a decade, I was told, Danny, this is the Holy Grail. Danny, this is the Holy Grail, right? And I reached a point where I just thought everybody in the healing industry was full of it. Nobody had any idea what they were doing. So when I discovered Dr. Hummer's medical discoveries, it took me 9 years of testing those medical discoveries to really get to the point where I had true conviction that this really is the philosopher's stone of healing. And when I reached that point, I decided to start sharing that information. This is the first book I wrote on the subject. This is published on Amazon. So this is an introduction to Dr. Hummer and his medical discoveries. It's written in lay language so that anybody with no prior understanding of the subject can read and understand it. I targeted this at terminal patients, because in my journey of nearly 20 years, I discovered that, frankly, the only people who are prepared to listen to me are people who doctors have sent home to die, right? Because then they have no other choice, and then they come to me and say, okay, Danny, now I'm ready to listen, right? So that's why I targeted this at terminally ill cancer patients. I am now also in the process of writing. So this is just an introduction to these medical discoveries. I'm in the process of writing a 500 plus book series, one book on each disease. This is my book on breast cancer. This is my book on IBS. This is my book on atopic dermatitis, eczema, psoriasis, and many other skin conditions. This is my book on testicular cancer, and I am building I've just built a platform to help write and disseminate these medical discoveries to the masses, so that what I didn't discover until recently is that basically these medical discoveries, the elites, Dr. Hummer was called to a meeting of a very senior spiritual leader in the early 1990s, and was told that if he did not sign over the intellectual property for these medical discoveries, that basically that he would be persecuted for the rest of his life. And they were good for their word. He was prosecuted many times, spent over 3 years in prison, had 12 attempts on his life, and they tried to put him in a mental institution 75 times. What he discovered is that they tested his medical discoveries behind closed doors, and have been using them for the last 40 years amongst their own inner circle. And they have survival rates of 20 or 21 people in a million in cancer, whereas in the West it ranges between 2,500 to 3,000 cancer deaths per a million people. So they've used these medical discoveries for their own tribe, and prevented the serfs from getting access to it. So my purpose in life is now to get this information out to the world, so that people get the opportunity to understand this, and you get a sniper's rifle to help you identify the life cause of the change of every cell in your body. It's truly extraordinary. So now I'm screaming it from the rooftops, which is why I'm here with you.
So are you, have you had any threats by the medical, conventional medical association or the cabal in general?
I've not had personal threats. I am censored into oblivion. I live in India. India, from a health perspective, is miles ahead of the West, and basically has every healing modality available. So it's a very safe environment to do this type of work. I can imagine that if I had carried out this research in America, I'm sure I would have committed suicide by shooting myself in the head twice by now. But luckily, other parts of the world are much, much more open to different healing modalities, and India is the ultimate.
Wow. Yeah. I met a celebrated doctor from India because she came to my town, and she was working at the post office because, of course, they will not allow her to transfer her credentials, right? And her father was celebrated in India, and her sister, and all in natural remedies. And I happened to have eye infection when I went to the post office, and I couldn't read the things that she wanted me to sign. And she said, breast milk. I went, she goes, you must know someone in your family that has a child. And I go, no, this is America. We don't have children. And I don't have family, right? And she said, there must be someone. And so I did track down someone, and it worked. And then when I ran out, I got goat milk, and that worked as well. So It's just amazing.
India is a truly extraordinary place when it comes to natural healing. I mean, there is, as I said, I wrote a book and I targeted at terminal cancer patients. Unfortunately, when people get what they consider to be a life-threatening diagnosis, the vast majority of people will still run to conventional medicine, and most will come to me only after they've been sent home to die, which I have no problem with. Would you rather go to the leading oncologist in Johns Hopkins, or would you rather come to some venture capital investor who spent 20 years studying cancer for a hobby and heals people, terminal cancer patients, for fun? So I mean, it's a no contest, right? So I entirely understand, but I am doing what I can in order to get these medical discoveries out to people. I mean, look at the differences in results, right? The cancer death rate in conventional medicine is 98%, right? Barely 2% of people survive chemotherapy, for example.
And why? Just explain why. The chemo does exactly the opposite of what the body needs. Can you explain?
Yeah, well, I mean, chemotherapy essentially is mustard gas, right? And strangely was designed to kill people during world wars by putting them in gas chambers, right? The fundamental, I've given a lot of thought to this, Tressy, right? When doctors say, "Oh, you have fast-growing cells that are growing out of control," right? I mean, they're absolutely right. You look at Dr. Hummer's testicle, right? He had fast-growing cells. Now, the problem that the medical system does not understand and misses, that the medical system says is fast-growing, it's growing out of control, and it's broken, right? We don't understand why the cells are growing fast, and therefore we consider that they're broken. The problem is that the medical system does not understand the life cause or the biological purpose of those fast-growing cells, right? So in Dr. Hummer's case, his son was shot and murdered. Nature said, right, okay, let's increase the size of your testicles so that we can make you into a superhuman testosterone-producing machine so that you can replace your child. And once you've done that, then we will take it back to normal again. It's no different to putting your foot on the brake or the accelerator of your car in order to avoid a road accident, right? So, but the thing is that medical doctors do not understand this. So basically they think that the cell is going wrong and it's broken, when it's not. It's going right. It's increasing your capacity to help you to solve the life problem because it's a part of a survival biological program. So when you understand the cause of the problem, when you understand the biological purpose of why these cells are multiplying quickly, then it's no longer broken, right? It's nature going right. It's not nature going wrong. So then what doctors do is they then say, oh, it's going wrong, it's broken, let's go in and attack it, right? Let's get the nuclear weapons to go in and blast the hell out of it, right? So chemotherapy is mustard gas, and what they're trying to do is to kill the cancer cells because they think it's broken, right? But it's not broken. It is doing what it should be doing in order to help you survive. And in Dr. Hummer's case, that was increase his testosterone levels so that he could replace his son who was just murdered. And this is the same with every biological program. He essentially unraveled the biological code. And basically, every part of the biology, you can, when you understand the life event and the biological purpose. So let's take breast milk, right? If you take the mammary gland in the breast, right, what they call a mammary or globular carcinoma in medical terms, breast cancer, right? Now, what is the biological purpose of the mammary gland? Is to produce milk, right? Now, if you have a 5-year-old child, you are no longer lactating. So take this situation. You're walking along the street, the child, you're not paying attention, the child pulls away from you, runs in the road, bang, and all you hear is screeching tires, and all of a sudden you see your 5-year-old child laying in the road who's just been hit by a car. Okay, now in the split second of that shock, what nature will do is reactivate the mammary gland in order to be able to give the woman the ability to breastfeed that child, to help the child come back to health again. Okay.
Wow.
Now, what do we call that? Mammary or globular carcinoma in breast cancer, and then they'll cut your breasts off and fill you full of chemo, and then they will kill you, right? In reality, if you understood that the biological purpose of a mammary gland is to produce milk, and back in our days of living in a cave, the only instrument a woman had in order to be able to nurse a sick loved one was her breast. Okay, so what nature does is periodically it reactivates that capacity to be able to give you the ability to nurse a sick loved one, right? If the 5-year-old child gets hit by a car and all of a sudden you go like this and you feel, oh my God, I've got a lump in my breast. That's right, because nature has just reactivated your ability to be able to lactate, so you can offer your breast to your now sick child, so that you can nurse the child back to health again using the magical breast milk. Okay, now if you offered that child your breast, number one, the child would get better quicker. Number two, you would not get a massive backup in the breast because you would be evacuating the milk from your breast according to nature's design. And as soon as that child is well again, basically that program would then get switched off and that extra capacity would be removed with something that we call tuberculosis, mycobacteria and fungi. Okay, so this is nature's design. And the problem is, and in our lifetime, Tressy, nature will not make a single mistake. Okay, the only problem is that when we get these breast cancer or testicular cancer, the problem is we don't understand why our biology is changing, why we have an increase in our capacity or reduction in our capacity, and we can't connect that to what's happening in our life. Okay, if we could make those connections and we understand, oh, okay, yeah, I know that my son just got hit by a car and is in ICU, and nature has just reactivated my ability to be able to lactate, so I can offer my breast to the child, so I can nurse the child back to health again, so the child gets well quicker, and I get well quicker, and as soon as the child gets well again, bang, it just switches off and it goes back to normal again. But instead we think, oh my God, I've got a lump in my breast, it's cancer, I'm going to chop my breasts off and then I'm going to take chemotherapy and kill myself.
Wow.
I mean, it's utter madness.
It is. Let's do an example for a couple other situations. So if a woman had a yeast issue, we've had someone ask about a yeast issue that's been 30 years or something. And they've worked on the diet, like you said, and natural remedies and all of that, and it's still an issue. What would you say about that?
So any chronic problem, whether it's a yeast issue, whether it's an eczema issue, whatever the problem is, basically, but this is the way our subconscious mind works. Okay, when we experience some form of trauma, our subconscious mind will take a snapshot of that point in time in order to have reminders or tracks or triggers as to that problem. So I'll give you an example, right? Say I'm walking down a city street and the street lights have gone off, right? And I'm walking down the street and somebody jumps out from behind a pickup truck, jumps over, bashes me over the head, knocks me unconscious, steals all of my money, right? In that split second, basically what's going to happen is my subconscious mind is going to take a snapshot, boom, right? Dark streets, no street lights, lined with cars, whatever. Okay, and then it will store down reminders of that problem. Now, whenever I am in a what my subconscious mind considers to be a similar situation, walking down a dark street with street lights, what will happen is I will go into fight or flight, and I will basically, my heart will start racing, my mouth will go dry, I will start sweating, my hands will become sweaty, and I will get anxiety attacks. What the subconscious mind is doing is it's reminding me of that event, saying, Danny, wake up. Last time you went down a dark street, you got bashed over the head and somebody stole all your money, right? Now, the way this works is, let's say, okay, if I walk down a dark street with no street lights again in future, I might remember, okay, yeah, great. Okay, that's right. I was in that dark street, right? Now, what happens if my subconscious mind stores down the fact that whoever mugged me jumped out from behind the back of a white pickup truck, right? And my subconscious mind stores down a white pickup truck as a reminder or a memory or a track of that attack. If I don't recall that guy jumped out from behind a white pickup truck, in future, every time I see a white pickup truck, I am now going to have an irrational fear, anxiety attacks about white pickup trucks, right? And God forbid if I was eating an apple when I got bashed over their head, right? Every time I eat an apple in future, it's going to trigger allergies or potentially even panic attacks, depending on how my subconscious mind has stored that memory down. Now, what happens is so let's say I had the apple, right? Every time I eat an apple in future, I'm going to get these panic and anxiety attacks because my subconscious mind has stored down the apple as a reminder of getting attacked in the street, right? So I now have a problem with apples. I have a problem with white pickup trucks and street lights and all sorts of stuff, right? Those things are all going to trigger me. Now, with a yeast infection, basically what is happening is the subconscious mind, any problem that goes beyond a couple of weeks or a month or whatever, or most problems to resolve, basically, for the most part, are being triggered by tracks and reminders. Okay, so yeast infection, some form of, I need to go through the detail of exactly the medical diagnosis, but some form of sexual conflict that you had 30 years ago. Okay, now whatever your subconscious mind stored down about that sexual conflict, basically you're still being triggered. Okay, if you had a bad sexual experience that triggered that biological program to happen, and that happened to be in your bedroom, in the house that you still currently live in, and basically what will happen is every time you walk into that bedroom, your subconscious mind will be reminded of that experience, and it will keep triggering the yeast infection to keep coming back again and again and again.
Yeah, she said it's systemic, so there isn't even any issue, with that kind of a focused area. It's just in the bloodstream, like just a systemic.
The devil's always in the detail, Tressy, right? But the fundamentals remain the same, right? I mean, right. Any chronic problem that you're experiencing is basically just being re-triggered by tracks or reminders in your subconscious mind. My Bible in the subconscious mind is a body of work written by a gentleman called Joseph Murphy, and it's called The Power of the Subconscious Mind. And what it basically does is it teaches you ways that you can manipulate your subconscious mind, which is worth everybody's time to read. I've read that book, I think, 7 times now.
I would love to compare the emotional roots that I use, which everyone always says are actually, right on, with what you're saying. It seems to me they could partner and go hand in hand, because the emotional root of yeast is denying your own power. So this person must have denied their own power, for that many years, and that thing gets triggered over and over, that situation.
So it would be interesting to compare, Tressy. I mean, Dr. Hummer wrote this book, right? Now, this basically has the life cause and conflict basically for every cell in our body, right? Including psychoses and constellations, schizophrenia, bipolar, ADHD, autism, Down syndrome, everything. Dr. Hummer spent the last 7 years of his life healing children with Down syndrome and autism using a form of music therapy. What he discovered is that if music is played at 432 hertz, and if the music is written in accordance with the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, that basically you can, he spent 7 years helping children with Down syndrome to pull out of Down syndrome and to develop normally.
Wow, that's so awesome.
It's insane.
Oh, it's so good.
Tressy, it's insane, right? I had a friend who had a 4-year-old highly autistic child, completely incommunicable and extremely angry. What Dr. Hummer discovered is this concept of an autistic constellation is basically triggered by an experience a child has gone through that both basically made them speechless, which is why they lose their voice. It affects the larynx, and also makes them extremely angry, which is why it affects the stomach. Then a combination of these two emotions in a trauma, and these are often linked to vaccinations, and people believe that it's triggered by the poison in the vaccination, which is not good, right? Nobody wants fetal cells and arsenic and God knows whatever they put in, aluminum and whatever they put in these vaccines, right? But it's not the vaccine poison that causes the autism. It's the vaccine experience where basically the doctors and the parents are holding the child down and they're stabbing him in each arm and like this.
Oh my gosh.
That autism is triggered by that experience. Dr. Hummer took scans of the brains of children with Down syndrome and autism, and basically autism it affects the throat and it affects the stomach. And when you get basically one conflict that affects two areas of the brain, what it does is it basically shuts down the development process and it retards development, which is why they become autistic. This music that Dr. Hummer developed, basically, I had a friend who had a 4-year-old autistic child, highly autistic. Before COVID, I gave him Dr. Hummer's music and he played the music quietly at night time whilst the child slept. And when I got locked out of India for over 9 months during COVID because of all the stupid travel restrictions, right? So I couldn't get home. When I came back to Bombay after COVID, I left and he had a 4-year-old highly autistic child, incommunicable and very angry. And when I came back, he had a highly extroverted, fun-loving, spunky 5-year-old with no autism. And it was absolutely mind-blowing. This is just by putting this music on and letting, and you can play it as though it's barely audible, but you put this music on. And he did the same with children with Down syndrome. He took brain CT scans of children with Down syndrome and discovered that at birth, basically, both of their hearing centers, so in the brain, the hearing centers are just over our ears in our cerebral cortex. When he took the CT scan of children with Down syndrome, both of these centers had been shut down at birth. Anyway, lots of research, and what he discovered is that basically these are caused by hearing conflicts. Right?
Yes.
And when he went to the mothers of these children and said, "Oh, okay, what loud noises were you exposed to during the first trimester of pregnancy?" Okay, and the answer came back, and this over hundreds of children and women, right? The answers came back: chainsaw, cutting down trees and shrubbery around first trimester pregnant women, dentist drill. Household drills that you're making the nursery for the newborn, right? Basically, apparently, these loud noises to a 1, 2, or 3 month old fetus essentially are equivalent to a lion standing behind us and roaring. and those loud noises basically are dangerous to the fetus, and they put the fetus in fight or flight. And if that happens 2 times during the first trimester of pregnancy, what it basically does is it shuts down both hearing centers and basically stops the child. The child is then in a process of retarded development, and basically then from the first trimester to full term, basically that's when the child comes out with a round face and the round eyes and basically Down syndrome. If you expose these children to Dr. Hummer's healing music, I mean, he had children by the age of 2 years old that are back to full development and completely pulled out of Down syndrome. Extraordinary.
You know, everyone is just pining for the med beds, and that's all they can think of. I need the med beds. I have to get to the med beds. And I keep saying, you are a walking med bed, and we don't have to wait. And here you go, confirming that one more time. That is so awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, if the knowledge that I have acquired over the last 12 years studying Dr. Hummer's medical discoveries, if that was taught to children from kindergarten, basically in the next generation, there would be no such thing as disease, because everybody would understand the life event. Oh, I got chicken pox. Okay, yeah, that's a separation conflict, right? Or measles or rubella, all separation conflicts. Children are very prone to separation conflicts, right? Because they're weak, and if the small ones get separated from the herd, basically a predator will kill them, right? That's in nature, and sadly also very much in today's society as well, right? So children are very, very susceptible to separation conflicts. But when they got chicken pox, or they got measles, or they got rubella, if they knew that that was caused by a separation conflict and not some virus that's running around the class, right? Then basically there would be no need for symptomatic treatments, because everybody would know the life cause of their problem and basically what they need to do in order to fix it. And therefore, Dr. Hummer estimated that when his medical discoveries are allowed to surface, that 95% of all treatment protocols that are based on symptoms will essentially become obsolete, which means that he's a very dangerous man to the medical industrial complex, because essentially he can put them out of business. So they did all they could in order to ensure that that never happened. You know, when they were arresting him, I mean, when he was arrested in his last prison sentence, I mean, he was arrested in Spain, extradited to France, and put on charges of conspiracy to practice medicine. Because one French doctor got hold of his medical discoveries, these ones, and was using his teachings with his patients in France. And Dr. Hummer was put in prison for 3 years for the work. He'd never met the French doctor, never met the French doctor's patients. So he was put in prison for 3 years for conspiracy to practice medicine, even though he had absolutely nothing to do with it. So they did everything they could in order to make sure that these medical discoveries can never surface.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah. So what would you say? We have another person who has gained, you know, they always talk about the cortisol weight gain around the midriff for women. And she's saying no matter what she does, she can't get rid of that. So what would you say on that?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, stop the cortisol, because that will whilst you're taking the cortisol, you basically put your biological healing into stasis, and you can never solve the problem whilst you're on cortisol.
Well, no, she's not taking it. It's like they say with stress, you get a cortisol drip naturally in the body. Yeah.
So let me explain how that works. There is a survival function in the kidneys that are called the kidney collecting tubule syndrome. Okay, Now, that survival function in the kidneys, basically what it is essentially designed is that if you ever walk into the desert and you have no water, we need water for survival. So basically, this survival function in the kidneys under certain circumstances will basically trigger water retention because water is critical for life. Now, the different conflicts that in today's life that trigger that basically is what Dr. Hummer essentially called either a fish out of water conflict, a refugee conflict, or a fear of death conflict. And how those translate into real life is that if you feel isolated or you feel abandoned, these two emotions will basically trigger the survival function of the kidneys. And you will know the easiest way to know when this program has been switched on is that as soon as the survival function of the kidneys gets switched on, your mouth will become dry as a desert. Okay, so what is nature trying to do? Nature makes your mouth super dry to make you take on more water so that it can retain that water, right? And urination will drop from 1.5 to 2 liters a day down to maybe 500 ml or even down to 100 ml, depending on how traumatic an experience you've gone through in terms of, so we have isolation, we have abandonment, we have feeling like a homeless refugee, or the fear of death. These basically 4 emotions will trigger that survival function of the kidneys, and you can monitor it again. You will get that. It's also somebody just takes all of the fluid out of your mouth. If for example, say you're running to the airport and you miss a plane or a train, very often, as soon as you experience that conflict, you'll go, oh God, I need to go and get some water. My mouth is so dry, right? And just missed a plane, and then you feel the subconscious mind triggers that like abandonment conflict because the flight has left without you, right? And all of a sudden, your mouth will go dry. You start glugging water, and before you know it, your ankles are swelling and your feet are swelling because you're glugging this water down and you're not urinating any of it out because nature has gone into that survival function of retaining fluid. Yeah, I mean I have a friend who lives between India and the US, and she says, Danny, I could never understand that when I'm in India, I'm slim and beautiful and everything, and then when I go to America, I get fat, and and it happens. It's very strange. I'm like, okay, what are your attitudes towards going to America? I hate America. I prefer to live in India and all of those things. Right? So my husband lives there, so I go there because I have to go there. I'm like, okay, if you want to solve that, so this is a refugee conflict, right? So when she leaves Bombay and she goes to America, she feels like she's homeless in America because this is not my home, right? So I said to her, if you want to stop adding weight when you go to America, go there and say, this is my second home. Bombay's my first home. This is my second home. And she resolved the problem very quickly. When you resolve this problem because essentially you start peeing like a horse. So all of this retained fluid, as soon as you switch off that fish out of water or the isolation conflict or the abandonment or a refugee conflict, basically you start evacuating that urine and literally you pee like a horse, right? So it's fascinating how it works.
It is. All right. Well, we're going to close down the show right now, and in about 5 to 10 minutes, we'll end up over on Tressy Trek Chat for Q&A. And did you get that link for the chat?
I don't have a link, Tressy.
Okay, I'll get that to you. We'll get that to you. So you'll be able to, and then when you get there, you just click join up in the right-hand corner. All right?
Are you going to email it to me? Or?
I am.
Okay.
All right. All right, we'll see you in just a few minutes.
See you over there.
All right, bye-bye.